Hey guys, just a little bit here on cognitive changes and mental health in late adulthood. First thing, if we're going to talk cognition in late adulthood, we have to start with the Seattle longitudinal study. This is one of the longest running longitudinal studies ever developed. This has been going on for decades, and I know we didn't do a lot on research methods in this class, but a longitudinal study is one in which you study the same person year after year, time after time. So they're going to be taking people who are children and following up with them across the lifespan well into late adulthood. And what they were testing people on were 5 different aspects of cognition. So spatial orientation, verbal meaning, word fluency, number ability, and inductive reasoning. So they test people, I think it was every 5 to 7 years, something like that. And what they find is that most people improve in their mental abilities during adulthood and across adulthood. But each particular ability of these 5 that I just mentioned has a distinct pattern for each gender. And that decline occurs later in life. And again, that's different by gender. So when would you think that cognitive decline would occur? And when do you think it might be starting to go down for men or women? Who do you think declines first? Men. If you guessed men, you're absolutely right. That's what happens. So let's take a look at our 2 charts. So you can see the purple is verbal meaning, yellow is spatial, this aqua color is inductive reasoning, red is numbers, and then this blue is word fluency. So let's just start with this. What are men best at? Right, so take a look at that red bar, that is numbers, and then yellow is their next highest, that's spatial. And we know from research that, in fact, men do tend to be a little bit better at numbers and spatial skills. What are women better at? Well, that's going to be the purple and the blue line, so verbal meaning and word fluency. And again, we know that from research that women tend to be a little bit better at verbal types of things. Now let's look at when cognitive decline occurs. So to my eyes, it's starting right about here, right about age 45 or so. It looks like men start to have their decline. And then women, their decline, it looks to me, is starting right here at about age 60. And so that's a very interesting difference. Make a note of that, write that down in your notes and know that for the exam. Men decline around 45, women around 60. Men are better at spatial and women are better at verbal. Another thing that the aspect of intelligence that the Seattle longitudinal study looks at is fluid and crystallized intelligence across the lifespan. We've talked about this before when we spoke about intelligence. Fluid intelligence is sort of your underlying ability to think and analyze, your memory, your abstract thought. This is your ability to apply your intelligence to novel kinds of problems. Your crystallized intelligence is more of an achievement type test. A fluid intelligence, we're going to test that with an aptitude test. Crystallized is going to be measured with an achievement test. This is how much do you actually know? How much algebra and how many words do you know? How much information about the world? How much history do you know? So fluid is sort of like your ability to think and learn, whereas crystallized is what have you learned. So what do you suppose happens to fluid and crystallized intelligence throughout adulthood? Do you think they would both go up, both go down, move in different directions? If you're thinking they move differently, you are correct. What we see is that both fluid and crystallized are going up, up in infancy and early childhood. And then in young adulthood, fluid tends to kind of plateau. And by the time you're in middle age, fluid is starting to go down. Remember, fluid is your underlying ability to think and about novel ideas independent of what you know. Whereas what happens with crystallized? Well, it just continues to go up across the lifespan. You know, think about your grandparents for a second. Do you ever sit and play Scrabble or something like that with a grandparent? I always would play Scrabble my mom and my grandma won every single time because she has enormous crystallized intelligence, especially for Scrabble, because she's just been on the earth longer. We were sitting at the dining room table the other night, my little family here, and my son, who's a teenager, said to me, "How do you know so much?" And I said, "It's just experience. It's nothing special. It's just life experience. As we get older, we have more experiences, we get more crystallized intelligence." But also think about grandma. She's probably not the best. Don't mean to stereotype here, but learning new things like the computer or phone or how to use the Roku, these things are going to be a little bit harder for her because her fluid intelligence is declining. Now, I want to think about why this might be the case, because there's a really good reason for this to be the case for humans. When you are young, you need a ton of fluid intelligence in order to learn all the stuff you need to learn, right? And so fluid intelligence is quite high here, and because that's a time when you need to accumulate knowledge. But your need to learn new things becomes sort of less important across time. And instead, your role in society sort of becomes to transmit and apply the knowledge that you already have. So take, for example, me. I'm right about here in middle age. My fluid is down, but my crystallized is high. And that's really okay for my period of the lifespan, because my job in our culture right now is to transmit the knowledge that I have and apply it, not to learn new things. Your fluid is probably higher than mine, but your crystallized is lower. And that's your job right now, to have a lot of fluid intelligence and acquire the knowledge that you're going to need so that when you're my age, you are applying and utilizing all of the knowledge that you have. All right, just a little bit on mental health. Depression is something that increases with age if you are not living in your home anymore. So young adults have about a 9% rate of depression, but older people living in the community in their homes have a lower rate of depression, under 5%. Put them in some kind of a home healthcare situation like assisted living, and the rate goes up to 13%. Have them reside in a nursing home, and now we've got a 50% rate of depression. So older people are generally happy if they're living in their home, but then with the help that they need, the rate goes up. Anxiety, excessive irrational dread about everyday situations. I'm sure quite a few of my students struggle with something like this. Older adults struggle with this too. Their rates are a little bit higher. 17% of older women and 21% of older women have anxiety. And you can understand why that would be, because when your faculties are kind of declining and you have less control over your situations, that becomes an issue. Many older adults will develop what's called mild cognitive impairment. They have cognitive issues, but are still able to function. This is the forgetfulness and the slowness that we sometimes see. About half of people with mild cognitive impairment will eventually become demented, meaning having a condition called dementia. Others will just simply stabilize, and a few will regain some abilities. Dementia is irreversible loss of intellectual functioning, and its cause is either organic brain damage or disease. It is very common with age, but it is always considered abnormal. I want you to take a look at the incidence of dementia. If you're in your 70s, you're doing pretty well. Only about 5% of dementia patients are 70 to 79. But by the time you're 80 to 89, about 25% of people are going to have dementia at this point. So 80 is when things really kick up. So know that number, 25% of 80-year-olds, people in their 80s, have some dementia. Of course, the most talked about form of dementia would be Alzheimer's disease. This is where there's declines in memory, learning, attention, and judgment, confusion as to time and place, difficulty communicating, having a hard time finding the right words. There are often some behavioral issues like hygiene issues, self-care issues, personality changes, inappropriate social behaviors or incontinence in the later stages. It is the most common form of dementia. It increases quite a bit after about age 50 and is seen in half of all people who are 85 and older. Deterioration averages about 12 years from the time of onset. It's faster if the onset is early in adulthood. You can see here a picture of two different brains. This is a normal brain, and this is a brain with Alzheimer's. I'll just mention that the brain will shrink across time, and you will see some shrinkage. Even in a healthy person, a healthy 80-year-old brain will often look like an unhealthy 70-year-old brain. So shrinkage does happen across the lifespan. We are programmed for decline and for death. On that happy note, we will end this little mini lecture, and I'll see you next time.